This is fair play, not 50-50 play. Okay. So every couple is going to come up with their own combination of what feels fair and reasonable. All right, babes. It's how did Sophia and Dan use the fair play method in their marriage day? Episode 3 of our mental load series. Let's dive into a little backstory. So I would definitely say we had a fairly equitable relationship before baby number 1. So stepson joined us, baby number 1 came from us together. We have 2 together, right? I am definitely your A-type, hyper-independent, perfectionist, do-it-all type. And I go to hyperactivity when I'm stressed. My partner is also do-it-yourself, independent, perfectionist in his own way. But he goes into hypoactive stress response, so downshifting. My partner's also neurospicy. And I would say after we had the first baby, I probably had undiagnosed anxiety and maybe a little bit of postpartum depression, definitely anxiety, definitely rage. So I was going into the hypo stress of doing all the things, worrying about all the things, and being nitpicky and critical about all of the things. And I was constantly in a debate about what I was experiencing and whether I was just not understanding his unique brain, whether there was some mental load blindness happening, whether I had impossible standards, or if there was something else going on. And the reality is that all 3 of these things were dancing together. And if you have a neurospicy partner, ADHD, dyslexia, autism, whatever, then like this is particularly important to pay attention to, because we don't want to blend or confound or mix up mental load blindness with your partner's neurospicy brain and how it works. Okay? Because they're 2 distinct things, and the strategy for addressing them and working with them is distinct as well. So we went to therapy. We went to therapy early. So I remember sitting in the kitchen, boobs leaking, whatever. Like it was very early on, and I was feeling resentment. I was feeling frustration. I was feeling contempt. I was feeling what the Gottmans call the 4 horsemen of the relationship apocalypse. And I just said, like, I don't want to feel this way. We need to go see a therapist. And of course, therapy didn't, prove me right the way I wanted it to. What it did was highlight the patterns and the dance that we were in. And in particular, it helped us to see that I go hyperactive, he goes hypoactive. So I get more stressed when I'm stressed. Everything becomes important. I get critical. I get judgmental. My husband goes into shutdown, watch Star Trek, zone out, zombie mode. And that was frustrating for me at the beginning because it didn't change things. It was just an explanation of like why things were that way. But it did give us way more literacy around essentially the 2 biggest things you can do in a relationship to make it more functional and healthy, which is assessing and reading your own self and your own needs, and assessing and reading your partner's. And so what we learned from that is when Sophia gets critical, when she starts nitpicking everything in a way that she hasn't been in the last 2 weeks, when she feels like everything needs to get done now, that's not always a sign that all of that stuff is true. It's more a sign that Sophia is stressed. And like Sophia needs to learn to read those signals as Sophia is stressed and do something about it. And Dan can also read those signs as Sophia is stressed and not take the criticism, but not also accept it either. Do you know what I mean? And like instead answer back with, I can see you're really stressed. Like, how do we support you? Likewise, my husband needed to start to notice that when he was going into shutdown, that was a sign that he was stressed and he needed to deal with the stress, not just rest more. And I also needed to do that too, right? Because it always looks like laziness on the outside. Shutdown looks like laziness and avoidance. And that's not actually what it is, right? So that was a big piece of this layer, and it's a big piece of the things that we've been talking about over the last couple of episodes. And even if you can just start to see the pattern of who goes hypo and who goes hyper in your relationship, so who downshifts and who upshifts, that can help a lot. Still not the whole picture though, right? So I think thing eased, Then we had another baby. Baby number 2 was a surprise, deeply wanted, but not on the timeline that I was hoping for. I had a very stressful pregnancy. Still carry some like birth trauma from that. Like it was a very hectic, hard time. And I can't remember exactly. I think Bubby must have been about 1, maybe 2 and a bit when I finally asked my husband to read the Fair Play book by Eve Rodsky. And my biggest criticism of that book is that it wasn't written to engage men. It's written to validate women, right? So if you've heard of it, if you've read it, right, Eve writes it from this perspective of she was in this fairly equitable relationship. She had kids. And then she just found herself with this shit I do list that was 1,000,000 miles fucking long and was like, what the fuck? And so there's a lot of frustration in it. There's a lot of anger in it as she's sharing the journey of her process of discovering what the mental load is and finding a solution in her own relationship. And so for men who are not prepared to read that vivid description without shutting down and going into defensiveness, asking them to read that book is not going to be your best play. My partner was willing to read it. I would say he still definitely found it a difficult read. And I would say he had some light bulb moments in terms of, just hearing things explained in a different way. If you have a highly defensive partner around this topic and you think he's going to struggle, then I would instead, share these podcast episodes with him, and I'll put in the show notes a couple of my favorite like mental load educators who are, trying to speak to men in the language of men that can like engage them in this conversation, right? The other option is like the Fair Play method comes with just a card deck. So the book, like the first half is like why and how she developed the method. And then the second half is understanding the method. So you can just buy the deck and it has the rules and everything. You can buy the book and use the second half of the book to have a script to bring your partner into the conversation if you are the overfunctioning mental load carrying partner, and you can play the game. So that can be a starting point. And again, if we think about last episode where I say we want to like move forward as well as repair, this is where we like move forward. So in short, Eve developed 100 cards or more that basically describe all manner of tasks and jobs in a life. So we've got like diapering and potty training, cash and bills, talking to the teacher, grooming and wardrobe for player number 1, grooming and wardrobe for player number 2, self-care, adult friendships, returns and store credits, home maintenance. There's also like a major illness card. There's a in-laws and aging parents card. There's a card for like, there's a word for it, but it's like, I don't know, if you go live through a major disaster, like something sideswipes your life. There's dishes, there's all the things. And so the beautiful part about this is it gives you like a tangible way of looking at and assessing all the cards. I would say for those of us who live in the north, there's a couple cards missing, including the shoveling card and the like winterization of the car card and things like that. But she's split them up into distinct groups. And so they're just a really great starting point. You may need to add some more cards to reflect some of the tasks that are unique to your own life, especially if you like live off grid or, live very rurally. But the point is that she delivered these cards. And the cards are divided into 2 main categories. There's the daily grind cards, which we've talked about. These are the tasks that need to be done every day. Dishes, laundry, cleaning and tidying, driving kids to and from things. And then there's the other cards, let's see if she has them labeled, that are just like everything else. She has subcategories, so like things out of the house, things in the house, magic making like Christmas and the holidays. But essentially there's daily grind, stuff that happens every day, and then stuff that happens like seasonally, weekly, etc. And I'm not going to go through all the rules here, but the gist of the rules are, this is fair play, not 50-50 play, okay? So every couple is going to come up with their own combination of what feels fair and reasonable. And that can shift from season to season. Perfect example. My partner does shift work. So in the winter, if he's laid off and he's available more, he might carry more cards. He might be on pickups and drop-offs every single day. Whereas in the season when he's working, I am definitely carrying more cards because he's out of the house 7 nights a week or 6 nights a week. So I'm cooking meals way more often. I'm doing school pickup way more often, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So fair gets to be defined by both of you. And Eve has lots of criteria and suggestions for that. But it's not about both of you holding the exact number of equal number of cards. It's not like you hold 50 cards and I hold 50 cards. It's a reflection of our life, our work, and all these things, and a way of making visible all the invisible labor that happens. It's about labeling that, like, taking the time to maintain your adult friendships is not just about the outings that you take with them. It's thinking about them. It's coordinating the outings, calling them, all that kind of stuff. Okay? So first rule, this is fair play, not 50-50 play. Second rule, when you own a card, you own conceptualization, planning, and execution of the card. And this is particularly important. So for example, if you own groceries, meal planning is actually a separate card. And this is where it's like there's interdependence. People have to work together, right? So one person does the task of assessing what's in the pantry, planning the meals for the week, and letting the shopper, if it's a different person, know what needs to be purchased. The shopper is equally responsible for like looking in the pantry, seeing what's needed, and asking the the meal planner what they need. So those two jobs are working together. But conceptualization means, what is needed for this task? What food do we already have on hand? What food do I need to order? Planning is thinking through all those pieces. Execution is actually ordering the groceries, picking them up, bringing them home, putting them away. Okay, the whole job. Just not picking up the groceries and dropping them off at home, not just making the grocery list. It's the whole piece. And sticking to that as much as your life allows can actually be very freeing. And I'll talk about that in a second when I get into what my husband and I did. Third rule is that there is a bare minimum standard for each card that is determined ahead of time. So if I'm holding the garbage card, for example, we need to have a bare minimum standard that's agreed upon. Does the garbage get emptied every day? Is it okay if the garbage is so stacked up that it's like overflowing? Or like, when and how often should the garbage be taken out for it to feel good for everybody? So this is where for my overperformers, thinking about what a fair bare minimum standard. If I'm the cleaner, is the bare minimum standard that I change the sheets once a week and do a quick tidy and wipe down of the toilets? Or is the bare minimum standard that I'm spending 2 hours a week, like fully top to bottom, cleaning baseboards, all the things? And this is where some negotiation needs to come in terms of like what is possible within the timelines and constraints of our lives, what is doable. And there's a bare minimum standard and there's an above minimum standard, right? Rule number 4 is that some cards can swap daily and some less often. So for example, for us, like we have kind of an agreed upon schedule of like which days of the week one of us is picking up kids. And other times that's just like negotiated in a constant day-to-day or like week-by-week process. So some cards are very fluid. Some cards like bill payments. I'm on bill payments. I've been on bill payments for the last 3 years. That's my job. I don't really talk to my partner about it. I just pay the bills. And I would say number 5 in terms of rule is like in almost everything that I teach, we need to go into this, if this is new, as an experiment. We cannot expect to get it perfect on the first go. The most important thing in all of this is that we are making the invisible visible, that we are having conversations about it, that we are noticing what is hard or what we are struggling with, or that we're noticing how much work something actually takes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't necessarily suggest doing an inventory where you like put out all the cards and then and I think you can download them from her website and print them out, where you put them all out and you like divvy them up as to like who's currently on what. I feel like that's just a recipe for going down the resentment path of arguing about who's carrying what right now. Instead, what I do recommend as a starting point, if this is very new to you, is to pick 5 to 10 daily grind cards in particular and actively assign them for a 1 to 2 week period where you're going to do an experiment. So hubby and I definitely looked through all the cards. That gave us a good conversation. And especially if you have been doing work in this area, if you do want to do a bit of an inventory to see the progress that you've made, I invite that. And if this is the first time you're having this conversation, just pick 5 of the most contentious or just the cards that always need to be done. And I can tell you which ones we did. We did dishes, laundry, cleaning, which included also delegating who hired the cleaner, kids' lunches, morning and after school pickup, paying the bills, meal cooking, and grocery ordering. So at the end of the day, we just divvied up those cards. There might have been a few others, but it's been a while now. But we just divvied up those cards. And I want to share a couple of my biggest takeaways from that process. And we've swapped who owns what cards. I think in the beginning, hubby was on dishes and kids' lunches. Oh, we also had grown-up lunches in the list. I was on laundry and grown-up lunches. I was on cleaning because I was managing the cleaner at the time. Hubby and I have both taken turns with the grocery ordering. So the first big takeaway was that we do things very differently. And I have to be okay with that. And a really perfect example is we recently swapped who does dishes and who does laundry. And so I've noticed that whenever you do a task and you do it for a while, you get into your own rhythm. And you notice, you develop your own little hacks for getting it done well. And so, for example, for me doing laundry, I have this system where I wake up early, I go downstairs to wake up my daughter. Her room is by the laundry room. I instantly put on the dryer for the second load. And then when I go down to get my daughter for the second time in the morning, I swap the laundry, take out the dryer, put in a load in the dryer, put in a load in the wash. That means I am always doing a load every morning. And then when I come home with the kids, the first thing I'm doing is swapping that load as well. So I got into a rhythm that worked for me because I'm up early and because I'm often bringing kids home from school, where I do a load every morning and every day after school. And that worked for me to do the laundry. And then I was dumping the laundry down in the playroom because I could fold it while the kids watched their afternoon show, which meant I could be with them and be present with them, but be folding laundry. So this rhythm worked really well for me. And I worked at the kinks and rarely got into a position where I was so behind that people were running out of laundry because I actively worked on that. When I first started taking on laundry, I was running out of laundry. When we swapped, right, I fell into the habit of micromanaging and shared my best tips with my partner. So I was just here's what I've learned from doing the laundry. It's a load minimum 2 if you can per day in order to stay on top of this. And here's what I do and here's my system. Now here's the problem. My husband is not an early riser like me. My husband needs coffee before he can function in the morning. So him waking up and going down to do an early load or swap it, just not fucking happening. And I could insist and force him to, and he could drag himself and force himself, but that's just not his rhythm. And to put that expectation on him is not okay. So we're a couple weeks into the experiment now, and has there been weeks that we've run out of certain things in laundry? Yeah. Is my husband actively going through the process of learning the rhythm for this for himself? Totally. And likewise, on the other side, I swapped to dishes. And so I'm oh, fuck. I do a load in the morning. I do a load after I get home from picking up the kids. I do a load at the end of dinner. And there's still almost always another load at the end of the day. There's 4 loads of laundry or dishes. And so I am slowly developing my system for when I want to get that done. And I have a lot more compassion for when my partner leaves loads of dishes, because I am getting to the end of the day where I'm I'm not doing dishes a 4th time. I've done them 3 times. I'm not doing them a 4th time. Whereas when I wasn't on dishes, it was very easy for me to be why isn't the counter perfectly clean of dishes? And it's oh, because he's not doing 4 loads of dishes either. So understanding that we're both different humans, we have different rhythms, we have different things, and we both need time to work out a system that works well, that meets the bare minimum standard. The bare minimum standard for dishes is ideally that the island is clear for the person in the morning who's making lunches. And the bare minimum standard for laundry is ideally no one is ever running out of things. So I don't want to hear kids saying, I don't have any jammies. I don't want to be like, I don't have any laundry. That's the bare minimum standard there. 2, this is kind of on a different track, but like my partner did learn a lot from reading that book, and I did feel seen in new ways. He's already great, and it did shift him even more, and he did develop more literacy around mental load. And I did too, because one of the biggest things that came out of that book is called RATs, or randomly assigned tasks, which we both have a bad habit of in our house. And now we can call them out all the time. Oh, sorry, this is a rat. And a rat is like when you've done all the grocery planning and all of the grocery ordering, and then you go, hey, babe, can you pick up the groceries for me like on the way home? The pickup time is this. So I'm on groceries. That's my job, to conceptualize, plan, and execute. And if I just throw my partner one piece of that whole job, on the one hand, I might need some help and I need to pass the baton, and that's fine. But on another, if I just randomly assign that thing, like, it's fair if he fucking forgets. Likewise, I think my partner's asked me to grab kitty litter on the way home a bunch of times this week. I still haven't done it because there was a little bit of a spill in the garage. And so like that's a task he was dealing with, and I'm just like not thinking about it. So rats are a huge thing. And just like reading this book gave us both another level of literacy around mental load that was important for our conversations. The third sort of takeaway that I will share is that these conversations got even better when we both got better at asking defensiveness to leave the room. And I will absolutely admit that a big contribution to this in our relationship was that my partner had some training at work that really game changed this for us. Because when conversations stopped being processed as an attack, we could both feel heard and process things differently and get into that problem solving space instead of staying stuck in the who is right place. So if you're struggling with this, it might be you need to go to some counseling or do some communication practice around defensiveness, because it's a big part of the equation here in terms of both of you feeling seen and validated for what you do, and both of you being in problem solving mode instead of in attack mode and blame mode, essentially. 2 last things I'll say. I mentioned it before, but we had to get creative around my partner's shift work. But again, the whole point was that we had active conversations. So at the beginning of last summer, we sat down and we were like, okay, what's our attempt at fair play for the summer while Dan's on shift work? And we made a couple of agreements around mornings that I got to sleep in versus mornings that he would be sleeping in to recover from being up late on shift work. And we talked about who would be doing groceries and meals and those kinds of things. And about 3 weeks into the plan, I was getting fucking resentful because I was not getting my sleep in mornings because it just wasn't working. He was still needing to sleep in even on the nights that he wasn't working super late. And so rather than being pissed at him for not meeting this rigid schedule, we had to look at the schedule and go, okay, like the plan that we made isn't working and we need to readjust. And a big thing that I've learned about myself, and this might be true for you, is it's all about expectation. So if I have the expectation that I get to sleep in on Mondays and Tuesdays, because that's the agreement we made, and it's not happening, and my partner's just sleeping in, and then he's not acknowledging that he slept in on my day, then I'm getting pretty pissed and pretty frustrated. If he's sleeping in on those days and he's acknowledging like, oh, hey, I know this is your day. I really need to rest. Is that okay? I'm still probably a little bit frustrated, but I've got at least an acknowledgement that my day, my thing got taken up. And if there's a conversation even bigger that goes, hey, the expectation that we had isn't working and we need to shift the expectation. If I know that it's just not possible for me to sleep in on any days because my partner just needs the rest when he's working shift work, as shitty as that might be, if I just go in with the expectation that I'm not sleeping in any mornings, then I can just let that go. If I go in with the expectation that I should be sleeping in some of those mornings, I'm going to hold it if it's not happening. So that's why these conversations come in really useful, because we're setting the expectation and we're shifting the expectation as things evolve and as we do these experiments, right? We try and then we go, that doesn't work. Another one was, and this is where it comes to the conceptualization, planning, and execution. So hubby and I, for example, before this had sort of developed a system where like whoever goes downstairs and thinks of it swaps the laundry. And we had also done what many people do, where it's like he does the laundry, I fold and put away the laundry, which I argue is legitimate. You could kind of just make laundry into 2 cards, especially if that works. If someone likes doing the laundry a certain way and someone likes folding it a certain way, for example, we want to play to strengths here, right? So how do we divide it? We play to strengths. We play to joy. Like maybe I love doing dishes. Cool. Have the dishes card then. And we also just play to fair. But what I would say is when we read this book, Dan and I were like, okay, let's just do an experiment of trying the conceptualization, planning, and execution piece, which meant Dan was on laundry and I was not thinking about laundry. And I was on dishes and Dan was not thinking about dishes. And I would say that after that experiment, there was way more of a reduction in mental noise when I just did not think about laundry anymore than there was to be half thinking about laundry and half thinking about dishes. Because when you think about it, the exhaustion from mental load is about how many tabs are open. So if laundry is just not a tab for me anymore, and my partner's doing it to the bare minimum standard and it's getting done and he's communicating to me when like something came up and he couldn't get it done or whatever, then I can close that tab. That's where we get the relief from the overwhelm, not from like half thinking about laundry and half thinking about dishes, but like letting go completely, almost letting the jobs that are not ours become invisible, which is kind of funny because then when you switch jobs, there's almost a readjustment process where you're like, oh, I have to care about dishes now because I've been caring about laundry for 6 months. So when you switch cards, there can be this like transition period. But I would say when you truly let go of the CPE, we call it, conceptualization, planning, and execution, you actually get the relief you're looking for. And the last thing that I want to say is that just delegating with these 10 cards has made a massive fucking difference in how we feel as a team, in how I feel about the load that's on my list, and about our ability to monitor and track when things are getting out of whack or not. And Eve mentions this in the card where she's like, actually often, I think she says it's about 20 cards, but it's mostly the daily grind cards because that's that Sisyphusian stuff that never ends. And so if you have a partner who's doing too much, you get her off some of the daily grind and you swap those cards for some of the bigger seasonal stuff that she's not doing as much. Or hasn't traditionally been in her wheelhouse, then you start to feel relief. Then you feel like a team. Then the intimacy can return. Then we're shifting how we feel as a partnership. So I hope that is making sense. I want to go through one last example here and a bit of a protocol for attacking like a seasonal situation like Christmas. And you can apply this same sort of template to a holiday or vacation that you're taking together, to Thanksgiving, to Easter, to any of these like magic making times with your kids. And so the first is to several months before that is happening, sit down and have a meeting about Christmas, as an example. The second is to get set expectations for a minute and talk about like, what does everyone want out of Christmas to feel great? What is important to you? If we're talking about a vacation, what does everyone want? Do you want new and novel experiences? Do you want to just sit on the beach? What does Sophia need for Christmas to feel amazing? What does Daniel need for Christmas to feel amazing? We may not get everything we want on our list, but we're going to put our full list out there to start. Then we're going to talk a little bit about budget if that's necessary, in particular for holidays. So like we went and looked and we were like, okay, how much money do we have to spend on gifts? How much money do we have to spend on like extra food and those kinds of things? So that we're again playing from the same level of what is the goal? What are we hoping to make sure everyone gets? And how much money do we have to spend? Then we went through the process of talking together about the different ideas that we had for gifts. And this kind of came through a couple of meetings, to be honest. And then you could argue that this is a bit of mixing tasks, but essentially we decided who was buying what gifts. So I'm currently, for this Christmas, in charge of like creating the two major gifts for our little kiddos, and Dan is on stocking stuffers. So I am not thinking about that. We decided what we were going to put in the stockings. Dan is in charge of going to buy those things and stuffing the stockings, and I am in charge of these two other gifts. We also talk about meals and events. Sometimes for me, like what I want over the holiday is to be able to host a solstice fire. And we have people over at our house for Christmas dinner. And I've been talking about inviting some friends over for dinner. And so these are events that require planning. And so we sometimes divvy up in terms of like, okay, Dan's on Christmas dinner. He's going to do all the invites. He's going to do the whole meal planning, buy the groceries for that, etc. Or we might be like, okay, Sophia's on event coordination for all these events. So she's going to send the invites and like coordinate logistics, and Dan's going to be on food for all of these events and making sure that we have everything in the grocery, in the house and in the pantry that we need to make the things that we want for that event. Okay. So essentially, we're sitting down and doing a mini version and thinking about all the jobs that are required, whether it's event planning, whether it's special kinds of grocery planning, whether it's gift buying. For a holiday, it's going to include like packing, unpacking when we return, passports, et cetera, et cetera. And then we're divvying up responsibilities for those ahead of time. And then I get to go into the holidays knowing exactly what I'm responsible for. And Daniel gets to go in the holidays knowing exactly what he's responsible for. And again, I don't have to think about the stockings because Dan's on stockings. That is what gives the relief. That is what gives us the sense that we are working as a team. These meetings don't have to take forever. I think we probably had like 3 15-minute meetings. We'll probably have a few more as we approach. Last year, we had a bigger sit down plan out. But again, as you get more fluent in this dialogue, you can do this more quickly. The point is talking about it, being intentional. The theme of anything you can take away from this podcast, whether it's in bed or not, is talking about it and being intentional. So now that we've walked through that, oh my gosh, I would love to hear your reactions. I would love to hear how you have shared things in your house. I would love to hear how conversations around the mental load have been going for you. Find me on the IG, leave this in the comments, send this to your BFF if she doesn't know how to move forward with this conversation and like what to do. And yeah, in the last episode of this series, we are going to talk about the mental load of sex and your relationship. So, like, who is carrying the weight of caring about your sex life and the health of your relationship? And how do we manage that? I will catch you then.